So welcome back to CSC220. Today is Friday, the 25th of August, and I wanted to share with you my appreciation for your patience this week while we roll with the changes. We have had many later student advisements and registrations to juggle, and so I haven't yet posted the videos from earlier this week, but I will get that done later today and tomorrow morning. I do want to remind you that your first assignment will be posted, but I've mentioned it earlier this week. You need to have, you need to submit an artifact that shows your legitimate acquisition, your acquisition of a legitimate copy of the textbook in one form or fashion. So you can do that through Kindle, you can do it electronically. If you click on this link, it'll basically bring you to the Vital Source website, but this isn't the only place you can go. I think on Wednesday or in some other classes, people have been asking about PDF copies. I don't have a problem with PDF copies, so long as there's a receipt to accompany it. So I know there are places where you can get bootleg stuff free, and this is a course literally about cybersecurity and hacking. But we do want to support people who spend an entire year providing a textbook for your use in the classroom, right? And what we want to do is also provide an affordable option, so it's not a racket where you're paying, you know, over $100 for a book that you should really be able to afford more easily. So trying to strike a balance here. I have said this in the past in previous seasons. By 11:59 p.m. tomorrow, I'm going to be sending email to those of you who have not submitted your proof of ownership or rental, legitimate ownership or rental. And what I'd like to do is just have a conversation about how we can work options between the two of us, because you're going to find that you're going to need this, this resource. It's also suitable for permanent reference as you go into the career field, right? When you go in on the job to the job site, this is one of those books that you're going to want to keep on the shelf for a while because there's a lot of useful stuff in it. There is a second thing I wanted to share with you. So I haven't posted, I have not yet posted that assignment explicitly. You'll see that appear right above here. Can everybody see my screen? Okay.
Yeah, we can see it.
And do I need to change the audio up or down? Are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. I heard a student respond, but I didn't hear it overhead. Did you hear it overhead?
It's very low.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not just me. Can someone else unmute your microphone so we can see if our audio here is working right?
Hello.
Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. So you'll see the 1.1 assignment for submission of a textbook artifact, right? And then this submission here is something I thought we would spend some time taking advantage of. Your textbook authors have provided presentation slides to help summarize the content of the first two chapters, and we started reviewing some of that on Wednesday. But before that, they actually had a canned activity for me to try with the class. And I guess presumably in a traditional setting where you'd have a dozen people in a room, you could break down into pairs of students, right? And we could set up separate breakout rooms, 4 or 5, depending on the number of students. But I thought, yeah, this doesn't really lend itself very well to our modality. So I came up with something different, okay? Something different. And what we'll do is return to this screen in just a moment. That's what I posted for assignment 1.2. Your take on flipper. So what you do is take the time to read this article, but then don't just read the article, Google some things about it. And your brain is going to work differently than everyone else's brain. So what am I saying? Each person is going to read that article and they're going to get a different idea about how that information is relevant. And what I want you to do is to think about your personal situation and then go to a Google prompt and type in packing, flipper, and then a couple of other terms that occur to you personally, okay? So I don't want the same crap, and I'm just gonna speak plainly because it's Friday, and Friday is when we let our hair down and we let our whiskers grow out, and later on we're linemen and we drink some rum, right? But Friday is when we do hands-on, and in most Friday situations, what I want you to do is to bring your technology to the session so that as I do things, you can do things. And if you don't have this on here yet, at your earliest opportunity, it's due 1 p.m. on Monday. So you have the weekend to do this at your leisure. And then you can start skimming the first 2 chapters of the textbook, right? So if you click this link, the way this is rigged, it should open into a new web page. Now, your mileage varies. This flipper is about the size of a Nintendo or a gaming controller, right? Does everybody see this thing? See how small it is? It's small, right? And basically, what we have here is, I'm trying to navigate the screen. There is some personal relevance here, okay? So what is Flipper Zero? It's handheld, and it's shown in the background behind this title. So you literally see that there's a little wheel here that you can work with your thumb. And so this thing is wirelessly enabled, but not just Wi-Fi enabled, Bluetooth enabled, RFID enabled, near field communication enabled. This thing is really powerful. And did I tell you the story about my son this last summer? Was that between you and I?
Oh, I think that was just
Okay, so I was sharing recently, this summer, I had the unfortunate experience to have to fly home on short notice because my mother passed away unexpectedly. And my 2 sons, who work in tech and cyber, were pallbearers. And so we had to stay nearby in a water park area, kind of a resort in Wisconsin, which is really out of sorts for us. But we were in a hotel and my room key was not working. And my older son bought one of these flippers as just on a whim. Just pick this up off of a website and ordered it. And 2 days later, it was in his hands. And then all of a sudden, here we are across country. And he threw this in the suitcase and said, hey, let's look at this. And I'll tell you what he did with it. And then I want you to read the article, and then I want you to transpose your own environment and your own circumstances into this scenario here. But my room key wasn't working. The front desk was 4 floors down, and they were swamped, right? They weren't very handy. And of course, we're kind of grumpy because we're dealing with a family funeral. I'm like, oh, my card won't work again. So my son comes to the rescue and he whips out the flipper. And I'm telling you, this is the honest to God, real world experience. And he goes, let me hold your room key. And he gets a hold of the room key, he holds it near the flipper, he does some stuff with the buttons. And then he says, walk down the hall with your card, I want to use the flipper. And he walks up to my door and he hits the button again. The green light is on and he's in my room. And that's a true story. Firsthand. So please read up about this using the link. And then what do I expect you to do with that information? Well, it's actually a pretty simple submission, okay? So when you get in here, I said, then share some quick thoughts about it, in particular, what impresses or concerns you most. Now, I'm talking about 2 complete sentences or more. Use complete sentences. So if you're sharing some quick thoughts, plural, my expectation is if you want credit for this, 2 complete sentences, right? Proper sentences. And enter these directly using the handy option. Now, what do I mean by handy option? If I click into this, can everybody see, right? Create a submission. You can type right in here. Enter your thoughts right here. And that's it. So no fancy, submit a Word document or a PDF doc. Don't do that. Just get your first impressions, think about your own circumstances, and then share your thoughts. Any questions about this assignment that is due 1 p.m. Monday? Going once. Going twice. All right. So, without further ado, let's dive into some of the material here in our slides. And then what we'll do is clear a little early today, okay? So one of the things we want to be able to do in each of our modules is define the things that we have to know and do. In every module, we want to clearly and intentionally outline, this is the student learning objectives, right? So it says define information security. There are 8 customary objectives for the first 2 chapters that you're going to see in the slides and on the module cover sheet. But there's also practical things that you need to know and do apart from that. So in our study guide at the very top, what you're going to see are additional objectives that are framed from experience. So those aren't going to be out of the textbook, but the information on those will be in supplementary material, the first sections of the study guide, or in other resources in the resources folder, where I may say, hey, this is something you need to know and understand about cybersecurity or information security. We told you on Wednesday that information security is another term that is used as an equivalent to cybersecurity, right? So whenever you hear the two, or if you hear cyber, right? And then discuss the history of computer security and explain how it evolved, right? So, and then define key terms and critical concepts. Now, by the time we get to the 3rd objective, I'm going to ask you as a class to make a decision, because I'm going to reorganize the content for this course live this season. And I'm making decisions. Should we follow along based on the tradition of the textbook reference, or should we roll our own a little bit? And I'll say more about that when we get to the 3rd objective on the screen there, when we start talking about some of the key terms and critical concepts. In fact, there is a mission critical 3-element or 3-tier concept about information security. And if any one of those 3 elements are missing, you don't have information security. You don't have cybersecurity, right? It's just that simple. And it's a very easy set of concepts. So without further ado, right? It says every organization, whether public, no, one thing I'm not going to do is read to you from the slides. Ordinarily, I don't like slides with a lot of detail. So what's going to happen is that I'm going to cherry pick certain things. I like diagrams. We were taught in my education courses, because I have pursued an advanced degree in education methods and learning psychology, right? So a lot of times I'll be talking about how best to remember a thing because I've actually had a chance to study that on the graduate level, about how people learn better, right? And one of the things they say is don't put a lot of words on a slide. You should just have a few words or pictures, and that's it. So I'm going to try to summarize things, right? I may show it on the screen for a bit, and I apologize. Unfortunately, a lot of publishers don't pay attention to best practices. They jam too much stuff onto a screen, right? But here's what it's saying. Every organization, whether public or private, regardless of size, has information it wants to protect. Boom. Here's a central concept. It doesn't matter if you're talking about yourself as an individual, or you're talking about your home, or any organization, right? And when we say organizations have a responsibility to their stakeholders, those are the people in that organization or the people that organization serves, okay? So there aren't enough security professionals to go around. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. That last phrase right there, we said users. I think if you recall from Wednesday, didn't we say who's responsible? Everybody unmute your microphone. I want you to respond in unison from what we said Wednesday. If you remember Wednesday at all, if you were here, I said, who is responsible, or maybe this was Monday. Who's responsible, was it Monday?
It was Wednesday.
It was Wednesday. Who is responsible ultimately for cybersecurity in an organization?
Everybody.
Everybody, thank you. Okay. So when I say everyone unmute your mic and y'all speak at once, that's what I mean literally, okay? Now, we will have opportunities to do quick polls in here. I'm not gonna get into that in this class, but we're gonna talk about it more on Monday. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So if you're not doing your part, you're part of the problem. You could be part of the problem. You may walk away from some of our classes in this course and realize you bad. What you've been doing is bad. And I'm going to give options, and we're going to cover opportunities to work adjustments, right? But in any case, yeah, here's where we get into the real detail, right? So as soon as we had computers, we've had hacking. We've talked about that. We talked about the Enigma machine. So here's a question. Could the Allies break the code without the machine? Do you recall what we explained on Wednesday? Could they break the code without having the machine? Yes or no? Anyone? I need a brave volunteer.
No.
They could not. That's correct. They had to steal the machine. In order to break the code, the machine was so sophisticated, in order to crack the code, they had to have the actual machine that worked the method to encrypt the information. And that's what was so innovative about this machine. Innovative and devastating, okay? Now, here are some important milestones, and what I want you to do, since the slides are in the references folder, I want you to know some of these. Like, you'll see later on a reference to Morris, the Morris worm. There was a professor here, my predecessor, named Al Lewitt. Al Lewitt is a graduate. He also worked with the BIPD. He did CSI, like crime scene investigation, DNA stuff, right? Really cool guy. He's the guy that brought me here to take over when he retired. And basically, he's living the life big and large in Florida. But to tell you more about this, he went to Cornell University a long time ago. So this is a guy that retired. When he went to Cornell University, about that same time, the world's first worm, a computer malware, a type of malware called a worm, was invented by a guy named Morris in the 80s. And he was the first person in human history to be arrested and jailed of a felony for creating the worm. And where did he go to school? Cornell University, upstate New York, at the same campus where one of our very own professors here in the next hallway, I'm in his office right now, right? World history, right? So the things that you need to understand, the most important things, this idea about FIPS, right? So the federal government got involved and said, hey, we need a way to encrypt. So DES, digital encryption standard, was one of the first ways to encrypt information on a computer, and then it was cracked by a French graduate student running a dozen or so Linux machines in a Beowulf cluster. So he teamed 12 PCs together, ran Linux on them, and cracked the code in so many days. It was a world shattering news. I mean, everybody was reeling from it. The adaptation that followed was a way to use DES to encrypt itself. So it's called triple DES, 3 DES. You'll see the number 3 DES. That the professional way to pronounce that is triple DES, right? So if you see the number 3 before the initials DES, they figured out that if they encrypted the encryption and then encrypted the encryption that was encrypted 3 times, they'd have an effective encryption of 156 bits. And that was good up until about 15, 20 years ago. Now everybody's using AES encryption. So we'll be talking about all kinds of encryption standards. The important thing to remember is that encryption for protecting information started in 1975 with large computer systems, okay? So it's been around a long time. The idea that you had to have some kind of login, 1970. This author, Secure Controls for Computer Systems, the RAND report, when you read that, you want to know, okay, why is that a big deal? We use logins and passwords. It's a way of life. You want to know when that first came about? There it is, 1970, logins and passwords. Because of a report, a single subject matter expert related, he said, hey, you know, we need to have some kind of way to control access. And unless we identify people and what they have rights and privileges to access, we're sunk. And that was groundbreaking. So in 1970, right? Now, password security in time-sharing computer systems, that was with mainframes where the physical environment was controlled. But some of the most basic security measures that we use today, it was 1970. So that's, I was 8 years old and 10 years old myself. Long time ago, right? Ritchie. So if you've ever heard of Linux, there was an operating system that was called Unix, and Ritchie, and Kernighan and Ritchie. So he had a partner named Kernighan, and they developed this multi-user system, and basically we inherited the benefits of this work so that nowadays we have Linux. In 1982, they had the Rainbow series. So in 1982, they came up with something called the Orange Book, the Red Book, color coding security interests, right? So you may see references in Google searches to what's the history or origin of computer security, and the US Department of Defense wanted to protect our communications, especially with regard to nuclear weapons and top secret stuff. And they had different levels of security, right? Which kind of corresponded to secret versus top secret, orange versus red. So, and you have these different colors like the rainbow. So when you hear the Rainbow series, you want to think all the way back to 1982. trusted computer security documents, right? Here's the Morris thing in 1984. So Gramp and Morris write the Unix system, but then I don't know if it's the same Morris, might be the same Morris. Later on, the first computer worm was developed, and a person by the same name, Morris, was jailed. I'm going to research whether or not it was the same, whether it was the same person that filed this document. If you see references to ARPA and ARPANET, the internet was developed initially because we wanted to be able to survive a nuclear attack. Everybody used phones. Phones were analog, and they were circuit switched methods of communicating. So not to digress into the networking class, but basically, in order to talk on the phone, you had to build a complete circuit from the person who was called to the person who was calling. And if that was on the other side of the world, you'd have a connected wire all the way to the other side of the world. What they learned is that the switching centers that connected people and build the circuits were a point of vulnerability. So if the Soviets attacked the US, or if the US attacked the Soviet Union, and we bombed just a couple of cities in certain places, all of the telephones, all of that would stop working, which would cripple your adversary. And so the internet came about because an advanced research projects agency said, hey, we got to come up with a way where it doesn't matter if we take out St. Louis and Denver and LA and by the way, Washington and New York, right? So hit the 4 big cities, 60% of the country can't talk. That's the way things were back in the day. So they decided that, no, we need to be able to share information, and we need to be able to do it where it's kind of like the Borg. Now I'm going to borrow from a Star Trek concept. I don't know if any of you were Trekkies, but there's this thing about Borgs and how if they're damaged from a weapon, the Borg cube just sort of, it's resilient, and there's all these other, it's really hard to stop all the elements of a system from communicating because you'd have to kill the entire system, is essentially what it is. So all of the members of that network are all interconnected with each other. And so if you wanted to stop the network, you'd basically have to kill everybody and blow up everything. So what are we saying about the internet? If you send an email and then all of a sudden Liberty, now I'm not going to pick on Liberty alone, okay? Your Liberty service dies while your email is in transit. The email goes and hops connections, literally hops other connections on other networks, and the pieces of that email are reassembled on the other side. It's actually really cool stuff. I may put some links in the resources folder just to refresh the trail about internet from the networks course. So ARPANET, vulnerability of passwords. So this is summary information. It's good to review. Okay. So one of the things that, and this is a really busy diagram, and one of the things I'd like to tell you is that everywhere you have a connection between the components of a system, you have a potential for exposure. And this is what hackers love, right? So essentially, there's all sorts of, when they say computer network vulnerabilities, they're talking about all of the ways that the information can be accessed because it's exposed. And so whenever you see the word vulnerability, I want you to substitute the word exposure, okay? Exposure. I'm going to fast forward because I want to get to some other, okay. Here we go. Here it is. This is the big thing right here. The CIA triad, those are three key components of information security. Think of them as the three legs of a bar stool. So if you have three legs on a bar stool and one of them is missing, you don't have a stool anymore. I mean, if you try to sit on it, you basically fall over, right? So the CIA is considered to be one of the most important ideas about cybersecurity, and you don't, if you're missing any one of the three, you don't have it. C stands for confidentiality, which means being able to keep the digital information confidential or a matter of confidence so that not anybody can see it or read it or access it, right? So that's pretty obvious. Confidentiality, it's about privacy. So the flip side of confidentiality is privacy, or a complementary notion to confidentiality is privacy. When and where you need it. Any questions about confidentiality? What's integrity? Well, if you have digital information and I want to screw you up, I wait until you go to the doctor's office. All right, is everybody listening? So I'm gonna get off the slide. And I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna go big screen here. Okay. Let's say I want to get you. I don't like you. I'm going to use digital tools to hurt you, right? So when we're talking about cybersecurity and information security, we're talking about the ability or means to be able to protect your interests and your stuff. So confidentiality. If I want to hurt you, I want to read about those secrets of yours. I want to get into the private stuff of yours, so I gain knowledge about your weaknesses and that kind of stuff, right? That's obvious. We've already covered that phase. But there's a lot to it. We're going to come back to it. We're going to dive deeper. On those three terms, we're going to dive deeper and deeper and deeper until you run screaming from the room. Integrity. Let's pretend that you have an allergy. And it's a bad one. Does anyone know anyone in their family or friends circle that has an allergy so bad they have to have what's called an EpiPen? So I'm being visual here. You have to take a pen and it's loaded with epinephrine. It's called an EpiPen. And if they get stung by a bee, their throat swells up, they can't breathe. Unless you have that epinephrine right there, they die before you can get them to a hospital, right? Well, let's pretend that I want to get you. And integrity is the means to change information. When you have digital information that has integrity, what it means is that it hasn't been changed or modified. So if you're supposed to get chemotherapy and I change your appointment to a month later, I can watch bad things happen to you because you think your appointment is a month later and you're supposed to be getting chemotherapy treatments a month sooner. Does everybody understand what I'm talking about? Okay? If I want to screw you up, I'll get a hold of the pharmacy information, and if you have a prescription, I'll change it from something that's good for you to something that's bad for you. Now, the fact that it's private information or not is not the issue here. The issue here is that the integrity of the information, the quality of the information has been modified or compromised intentionally so that it's false information. Integrity means that you have confidence that what's there is accurate and truthful. So in terms of information security, if I'm a bad guy or a bad girl and I want to rock your world, all I really have to do is adjust or modify your information so that you hurt yourself. That job interview, you thought it was Tuesday? It was Monday yesterday. And your competition beat you to it, and they got the job because you were a no-show. And all they did was change the date of the appointment on your screen so that you didn't know you were missing the opportunity of a lifetime. Does everybody understand what I'm saying here? Okay, think about it. Plane flights, wedding dates. Can you think of simple ways where a little tweak of information could be devastating? Hell yeah, right? That's the plain truth. Integrity. Now let's talk about availability. And here's where we get to the best part of this class. I'm going to tell you about availability. I'm going to tell you about cybersecurity as a profession. And then I'm going to tell you a dirty little secret. And I'm going to ask you if you would like, as a class, to make a decision together with me to change the content of our first module so that it's more hands-on and it's more practical. Let's talk about availability. I can do something called a denial of service attack. I take other things and I barrage a network piece of equipment or your device so that it's dysfunctional. It can't serve your purposes. It's denial of service. That's another method. Now, under the broad context of availability, here's the thing that I think is kind of broken about the whole cybersecurity industry. They're big on the hacking. They're big on the encryption. They're big on all the gadgets. They're big on all the stuff. That's sexy. What they're not big on is a battery backup so that when the power flickers, you don't lose your internet. They're not big on other availability interests. The simple truth is, in networking, if you've had CSC243 with me, you know that the physical layer of the network is the most important when it comes to your career progression. There are more careers that die because people don't pay attention to the physical layer, the actual wire or the actual radio signal. It happened here. I'm going to show you. It happened right here. Did I not tell you about the wireless in here and how somebody put it behind the steel cage and they didn't realize they were doing this, right? Availability, right? So this kills more careers because people are all about the sexy stuff and the complicated stuff and the cool stuff, and they're not about the practical stuff. Well, I want to wrap this up quickly. You have an opportunity, and I'm doing this in one other class, to make a decision as a class. I'm gonna pull up the chat window and I'm gonna pose a question to you. And I want you to respond only to me, directly to me as an instructor. So when you respond in chat, I do not want you to just type in your answer, okay? I'm gonna stop recording, I'm gonna stop sharing, and then I'll see your responses as they roll in. I would like to adjust the content of this course, because I want to conduct a kind of homage to the unsung hero of cybersecurity. Everybody's about the confidentiality part. Everybody's about the integrity part. Everybody thinks that stuff is real sexy. That's what you see in all the movies. But the simple truth is that there's broken stuff around us everywhere. If you live in the US Virgin Islands, you know about the availability challenges we face on a daily basis. Our networks are up and down and up and down and up and down. They're slow. They don't work when you need them, right? So my question to you is, could we flip the content of our class? Could we make the first module hands-on workshop? You go home to your home networks, you do things, you investigate things, you work your own field research, you find out where the availability challenges are for your own home network, in your own environment. And we give you the tools to tackle, to improve the reliability and the stability of the service that you woulda, coulda, shoulda had all along. Now, what that means is that I'm gonna ask you to be patient for a couple of days while I put a different study guide in place. And then I'm gonna ask you to do some hands-on stuff. And I'm gonna ask you to check some things on your home network. And you're gonna need to be willing to do that up front And it's gonna get a little personal, because when you get on your home network, you might find that there are some things that need to change, and then you have to advocate with your other home users, right? I'll get into the pornography and all that other stuff on Monday. We're not talking about that today. What I'm saying is that you're gonna look for things that cause problems with regard to availability. And we're not gonna get into the weird stuff or the awkward stuff. We're gonna keep it practical. But I want your permission to do that. I could just have modules 1 through 6, and we could cover chapters 1 through 12, and we could grind this out. But I think we're doing a disservice in cybersecurity in general. For the 25 years I've worked this, I've seen so few people care about availability, and it's like, oh, come on. Come on. You want to spend $25,000 on a state-of-the-art firewall because of all the cool, sexy stuff that's being hacked on your network, but you're not going to spend $2,500 on a new backup system? Because if your machine crashes, you got to be able to make the data available again after the hardware fails. A hurricane will destroy equipment. A natural disaster will kill your ability, your infrastructure to get to your data and to connect and talk to people. So what I'm saying is that in the US Virgin Islands of all places, we should know firsthand how crazy it is. We don't have more reliable, more consistent networks. And we don't spend any time fixing that part of it that's low-hanging fruit. So I'm going to type a question in here into chat. I want you to answer, and then we're going to clear the class, okay? And depending on the majority of the responses, I may change module 1 and turn it into a hands-on practical excursion for us to examine the availability and consistency of the network in your world. And I want to spend the first 2 weeks fixing simple availability issues to the extent that you can do it in your own home. Okay? Everybody understand where I'm going with this? So you're going to vote yes, change the course content. You're just going to say yes, but I'm going to ask, shall we adjust our course content to tackle network availability issues up front? And that's giving me permission not to follow the textbook, right? I don't want to get to the end of the course and they're like, yeah, we started with chapter 1, but we only got to chapter 10 because you got weird in August and September, right? I'm just sick of not getting to the availability piece in the course, and I want to flip it this time because I think your fall will be better if you get a chance to even improve your home network. I mean, just a bit, right? Does everybody understand where we're going with this?
Yep.
Okay, so in the session, I'm going to type, now you're going to hit the, you're not going to select everyone, so you don't just type your answer. Say, would you approve a change in our first module so that we learn and fix common availability issues with our tech? And when I say tech, I'm talking about devices, networks, the whole 9 yards. You're going to answer yes or no, okay? And then we're done. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. I will stop. Oh, actually, I stopped sharing the screen already when I went to video. So what I'll do is stop recording.